The first cycle of the new Abyss for version 6.0 has just came out, so here are the disclaimer. Before you move any forward, feel free to pause the video to read it for a little bit. Timestamps are going to be provided in the description below, so feel free to skip to whichever part that you may need. So before we begin, I just want to talk about the slight revamp that I've been doing for the Magic of Theatre, and the Abyss Guides video from this video onwards will receive that revamp. So I'll give you a brief overview on how it's going to go. So I'm just gonna show you the new visual infographic first, giving you a picture or an easier way to really view things in a bigger picture so that you don't actually have to watch too much of the video to actually understand the information that I try to convey. And then after I'm done explaining, I'll include the run immediately afterwards to show a demonstration of the tips that I just give. If there's nothing else, let us get started. So the blessing for this time around is that whenever a character triggers any hydro-related reactions, you'll get a shockwave which will deal true physical damage. This effect can occur every 2 seconds, and as usual for these kinds of true damage blessing, they don't do enough damage for it to matter, but it is a nice little additional DPS for whatever teams that you may run. For floor 11, the Dayline disorder is that everyone will gain 60% Electro and Dendro damage bonus, making it so that if you run a team that centers around Electro DPS or Dendro DPS, you will be benefiting the most in this case. However, the enemies this time around don't really need that much attention, so just do whatever you may see fit. So if we jump into Chamber 1, there's going to be 6 enemies and most of them are rather not too notable. When you start off with the Nobushis, what you want to do is simply go to either side so that you can bait or push one Nobushi towards the other. Once you kill the first 2 of them, the second wave will be 2 Kairagis. Aside from the strategy where you just go for one Kairagi, the other one will go after you. That will help you a bit on your grouping side. And they do have the souling mechanic where if you were to kill one of their partners and the other one is allowed to do another attack, it will basically enter a state where it heals half of its max HP and enter the enhanced state where they are immune to both frozen and petrify, making them unstunnable in that sense. So ideally, you do want to kill them both close to each other, or if not at the same time, so that you can save a bit of time for your clear. And for the final wave, we do have 2 Assault Specialist mechs. I think this is the Numa variant. Just go for one and the other one will eventually go to you. You can use certain things like Overloaded or certain Elemental Bursts in order to push one towards the other. And once you're done, we'll move on to the next chamber. For Chamber 2, the first wave will be a bunch of adult fungi. They do have the whole mechanic about being in the activated state. If you apply Electro and then applying Pyro will enter them to the scorched state, but they don't have any particular mechanics worth noting, so just go for one, the rest will eventually come to you. Kill them all at the same time, and then the second wave, you're going to be dealing with 2 Baptismal Bishaps. Now these guys will have 30% Hydro resistance, and the most annoying thing about them, like all Bishaps, is that they're very easy to stagger, and I would argue a little bit too easy to stagger. While I would recommend some form of grouping method, they get staggered too often for this kind of strategy to be kind of consistent, so just focus on doing as much damage as possible, and if they die, they die. Just keep watch of the one move where it charges up this ball in its mouth, because getting hit by that energy ball will sap a little bit of your health and a good portion of your energy, so it's going to be a bit annoying if you don't have enough energy recharge. For the second chamber on the first half, we start off with one Hydro Consecrated Beast, being the Crocodile. The only two things that is worth mentioning is that if you want to do the funny thing, you can basically go around at its tail region because it doesn't have any real attacks to actually like put it too far out of its position. So if you're having trouble dealing with him moving quite a lot, this is the one thing you can do. However, once you lower its health or enough time has passed, it will do the ultimate move, summon the Phagocytic block. You want to break the block with either one Hydro It or 6 other elemental attacks. After you break the block, you will absorb it and then hit the Crocodile again in order to stun it and make it lose a bunch of HP. Stunning it this way will also make him lose quite a lot of resistance, thus increasing your overall total damage. And after you kill him, the second wave will be the Consecrated Horned Tiger. The same mechanic as always. Both of these Consecrated Beasts do have additional resistance or really high resistance to their own element. Just do the same thing again. They'll do the fancy big move, make sure you break the block, stun it, and then kill it whenever you are done. For the second half, you start off with 2 of the little primal constructs. The best way for you to deal with them at the same time is to simply go to either the left or the right side and try to push one towards the other. They do have a mechanic where if they were to go invisible, what you want to do is basically apply Electro on these little pylons on the side, but I'm not going to talk too much about it. I'll just explain it because these guys are not the tankiest enemies alive. After you deal with them, the second wave will be 2 of the new Land Cruiser enemies from Not Cry. So we have one Electro on the left and we do have the Hydro one or the Shield one on the right. So the Shield one has an annoying mechanic, so my recommendation is to focus on the Electro Land Cruiser on the left first because the Scout or the Hydro Land Cruiser will eventually turn its shield off. However, if you use certain abilities like Shenling's Pyronado, Mawukia's Charge Attack, Overloaded, or even Nuvolet's Charge Attack, you can basically bypass a shield. But if you're not too strict on time, you can just simply chill and relax, and eventually it will turn its shield off to enter an attack mode. And lastly, the third wave will be 2 Ruin Graders spawn at the center. They do have the whole weak point mechanic, but as long as you just keep them grouped up next to each other, it shouldn't really be too difficult, so there is nothing for me to say here. So for Chamber 3, the first half, you start off with one of the regular, the Not Cry support soldier, and then we have the same Hydro Shielder Land Cruiser. Same strategy as the previous chamber, you just wait for the shield to turn off and try to focus on killing the support troop first. And same as always, Pyronado, Maoika's charge attack, Overloaded, or Nuvolet's charge attack can bypass the shield, or you can simply wait for him to turn off in order to enter the attack mode. The second wave will be one singular construction specialist mech at the center. There is the whole Arca mechanic in order to disable the elemental attacks, however it doesn't really provide any sort of damage bonus, so just kill him as you would to a regular enemy. So for the second half, you're going to start off with 2 Ruin Cruisers and 1 Ruin Defender slightly in the frontal position. These Ruin Cruisers will have a chance of basically dashing backwards, so if you can use certain AoE abilities that can stun them out of that state, that would be highly recommended. But my recommendation is just simply focus on 1 Land Cruiser and try to get the Defender at the same time. And once you kill them, the second wave will be 2 Ruin Guards at the center. Once again, no notable mechanic with the Ruin enemies, just kill them, and then you will get the last 2 enemies in the third wave being the 2 Ruin Drakes. The Ruin Drakes do have this charge up mechanic where you basically want to prevent them from charging up and gaining additional resistance to the damage that did the most to it by simply hitting its eye looking weak point. And if you can't do that, you can always wait later on where it does certain moves where the thing will start glowing, and that's where you know you can hit it and remove the additional boosted resistance. But otherwise, there's no notable stuff, so we'll get on to the run. So for flow 2 of the leyline, these orders are split into 2 halves. The first half, characters' electro charge damage and lunar charge damage will be increased by their respective values, while the second half, the characters' bloom damage, including Burgeon, Nilo Bloom, and of course Hyper Bloom, and of course Lunar Bloom damage will increase by a certain portion. It's very clear that with the lineup they're about to see later, the Electro Charge or Lunar Charge based teams are going to have quite a high amount of priority on the first half, while the second half prefers you to run any Bloom-centric teams, whether it be Burgeon, Hyper Bloom, or Nilo Bloom, or whatever Bloom variants that you can find. So we start off with Chamber 1. The first wave will be a singular Mirror Maiden. She does have 50% Hydro resistance, so she will take a bit less Hydro damage. However, you can use certain staggering abilities in order to abuse fall damage because she is actually a human enemy. Of course, she will enter a state where she becomes immune to any sort of stagger once she puts these little mirrors on the floor, and then you get hit by that mark. But this one shouldn't really matter too much, just try to focus on killing the maiden as fast as possible, and then when you get to the second wave, we will have the Battle-Hardened Cactus Legend or the Pipilpan Idol. The Pipilpan Idol will have less Hydro and Electro resistance as compared to all the other elements, and he does take increased damage to Electro Charge and Lunar Charge itself. After it does the taunt, it will immediately enter the Mirage Hat phase, where it basically turns into 3 hats, and the hats will swap a total of 3 times. The best way for you to spot it is 2 very simple ways, or rather 3. First is to simply keep watch of the position so that you can save some time. Second is to pay attention at the hat that has his face on, which shouldn't really be too difficult to spot. And the third one is you can wait for the hat to attack. Whenever the hat does the AoE range attack, if you see a purple radius as well as a purple expanding circle, that is the fake hat, while the real hat will have a white expanding radius. Applying Electro Charge or Lunar Charge on the right hat, which is where he is, will stop him from swapping positions altogether, and building up the bar above its head will make it take massive damage to its ward shield. The hat swap will occur 3 times, and this position is completely RNG. There's a chance that he will move all 3 times, but there's also a chance that he will not move at all, so try to pay attention to wherever his position is at. After you break the ward shield, it will get stunned based on a portion of the damage you dealt to the ward shield itself and be stunned for about 10 plus seconds. And afterwards, whenever he does start attacking, there is a fury bar above his head. If you build up the bar to full, it will enter, I guess you could say, an aggravated state where it will simply extend its attacking phase. This would be the most ideal so that you can delay the time before he actually enters the Mirage Hat phase again.
周りを見張っててくれ。夜の幻
吸引テスト開始。理想の風シミュレート。はあ。
あまり遠くに行くなよ。さあ。
や姿を。6308。はっほっと。吸引テスト開始。はあ。
行け、もう自由だ。
安全距離確認。夜の吸引テスト開始。はっはっ。いやー。はっはっと
さあ、みんなに挨拶だ。
断罪の630。はっいやー。元気出して影のカラス。
周りを見張っててくれ。
よっとは7号式モジュール。安全距離。やはっほっ
さあ、みんなに挨拶だ。じゃあ夜の
吸引テストとみんなを守るからね。やだ。
So for the second half, the first wave will be 2 Hydro Phantasms. While these creatures are immune to Hydro, they are also permanently Hydro infused. Once they enter the enhanced state, they will be immune to Frozen, but they will still take damage. Of course, because they are permanently Hydro infused, this allows you to do a lot of really cool reactions, notably Vaporize gaining the most benefit from the damage bonus. Once you deal with these two really quickly, the Hydro Tulpa will spawn at the center. Similar to the Phantasms, the Hydro Tulpa is immune to Hydro but also permanently Hydro infused. And every now and again, it will occasionally summon a mini Tulpa, so it is ideal for you to try to kill the mini Tulpa with elemental attacks except for Hydro itself. That's because when the mini Tulpa is alive, the big Tulpa will try to move next to the mini Tulpa in order to absorb and get bigger. And you don't want him to do this because he will do lots of damage, which is noticeable especially if you're running something like a Bennett in your team, leading to a potential one-shot.
痛くしちゃうかも。覚えたわよ。
この件はわかるかい？
やったはりこりなさい。はっ
炭になるがい。おとなしくしな。
覚えたわよ。
渚のリン。
For the first wave, we start off with 2 Hydro Helical Rogues, which does have 50% Hydro resistance, and they do have a Scythe attack which does a lot of damage. So even if you're on Bennett Burst or not, you will want to try to be careful because you will actually take quite a decent amount of damage, and there's a high possibility of you getting 2 to 3 shotted. The strategy here is to simply go for one of the rogues and try to push one towards the other, but regardless, those guys are melee attackers, so they will find a way to group up next to each other whenever they can. If they do summon a Hydro Slime, just try to break it with elemental attacks so that the rogue itself gets stunned. Once you're done with the Helical Rogue, the second wave will be the new boss, the Radial Moonfly. The Moonfly itself does have 70% Dendro resistance, and it will generally do about 1 or 2 attacks before entering the Enhanced state. Whenever it does the Enhanced state, it will apply a debuff to your entire team, which does the following. It will decrease your damage dealt by 50% in terms of damage bonus, it will reduce your crit rate by 100% and decrease your incoming healing by 40%. So the best strategy here that I found is that you want to use your burst in order to iframe the damage itself, and before you actually let the Moonfly enter the status, you want to keep all your party members topped up with whatever healers that you have. Save all your healing abilities and wait until the debuff comes out, and then once the debuff is applied, you have to heal your characters to their max HP in order to remove the debuff. And when your character is healed to the max HP, the debuff will be removed and the character will gain 15% crit rate and 50% extra damage dealt. My recommendation here is to try to keep all your characters topped up before it enters the enhanced state, and if you want to time it properly, just like the gameplay I'll be showing later, you can actually use your healing abilities like Barbara Burst or Gene Burst in order to use your healing abilities at the same time that it applies the debuff. It basically makes it so that you don't have to heal as much in order to remove the debuff on your entire team, which is why I will put a lot of emphasis on 2 things. One is to make sure to bring a healers, which I will recommend in a later section, and 2 is to make sure that your team is not half dead, because otherwise you're not going to be doing any damage at all. And forget about Favonius because you're literally going to have 0 crit.
あまり遠くに行くなよ。行け。
吸引テスト開始。安全距離確認。6308とえいよっ夜の
せい。自由になれ。さあ、みんなに合図。
安全距離はっほっとえいよっはっ
もうち
ミュージックスタート。準備できた。
お嬢様のお
7号式モジュール6308ユニよっ安全距離
じゃあな。さあ、みんなに合図。
えいはっとはっほっえい影のカラスが
あまり遠くに行くなよ。周り。
吸引テスト開始とはっはっ安全距離確認ほっバーバラ
じゃあな。さあ、みんな。
はっとみんなを守るからねはっ
So for the second chamber, we do have 2 Thunder Craven Rifthounds. These Electro Rifthounds will have 25% resistance to all elements and all attacks, including physical. However, it does lose Electro resistance whenever it enters the Enhanced state. You can force it to the Enhanced state by filling the bar with Electro. However, doing so will make it more aggressive, which could actually be counterintuitive if you want to clear this as fast as possible. And of course, all of their hits will apply a status called Corrosion, which does make your team lose a small amount of HP over time, so a little bit of healing would be nice to have here. Once you deal the Rift Hounds, the second wave will be 2 Assault Specialist mechs again. You can either choose to go to the left or the right mech and try to push one towards the other. These guys don't seem to really like doing melee attacks or grouping to each other, so if you can try to push one towards the other one, that would be in the most ideal situation. And try not to get them to move too far from where they spawn, so that whenever you're done with them, the third wave will spawn exactly at their location, so minimizing the time that you will waste for all your abilities, especially if you're running circle impact teams. And for the final wave, we do have the Aramite Geo Enchanter as well as the Dendro Aramite Elite. So what you want to do is you want to go in between them and just, charge up and do all your abilities. Whenever they do summon their little pets, notably the Geo Crocodile and the Dendro Snake, you want to focus on killing their summons first because this will stun them for 10 seconds, make them lose a good amount of HP and a lot of resistance that they had earlier. And then the rest is pretty straightforward. These characters or these enemies don't really move too much. My recommendation is to try to focus on the Dendro Lady or the Floral Ring Dancer because she is a range unit while the Geo Chanter is a melee unit. So for the first half, you're gonna deal with the one Oprishniki support lady. She's just some random Russian lady in a gun for the new Nordkrai region. I don't have any notable strategies here, just to try to kill them as fast as possible. And then you will be dealing with the second wave being the new Knuckle Duckle boss. Basically, whenever it starts, it will create a shield and summon 5 of these little ducks and gain super high resistance. The ducks will have about a quarter of his HP, 150% resistance to everything except for Electro with a neutral 10%. Ideally, you want to kill the duck because each of the duck will actually assist you in breaking the shield, or the other alternate way, which they want you to do, is to kill the ducks by applying Electro Charge or Luna Charge to the enemies 10 times. Upon being fully charged, the ducks will propel themselves as a bomb towards Knuckle Duckle, and successfully breaking each of them will stun the Knuckle Duckle for 15 seconds. Each duck killed will deal 5% of the boss's max HP as damage, so killing all of them will basically make it lose a quarter of its health, well 25% max HP. So the only strategy I can really give for this phase is that if you are in front of the boss whenever it does the dashing attack, it will always end with a simple jump into a simple plunging attack, and this could help you save a little bit of time and try to time your killing for the little ducks so that you can stun him exactly when he's right next to you. This can help you save a little bit of time because there are certain situations where I would already kill all the little ducks and then the boss itself is like at the corner of the map, so that is not exactly ideal.
姿を見せよ歌え僕の名のもと風よ私に応えるのだ影を打つ僕を夜の源源世界を熱狂の渦にいざ勝負風の神
悪を見極め影を刈り尽くす。争点。はっと
ほっお披露目だ。歌え僕の名のもとに。
お嬢様の
剣に誓う。邪悪を刈り打つ。
光り輝くがいい。断罪のな
風よ、潔白を証明することだ。じゃ
じゃじゃーん。世界を熱狂の渦に。影のカラスが言う。
剣に誓う。悪を見極め影を刈り尽くす。
And for the second half, we have 3 of the Shadowway Husk Knights. And my recommendation here is, for grouping, you want to go for the Cryo Archer on the left and try to push him towards all his teammates. And if you do have a shield on your team, try to be careful and don't get hit by the Pyro Husk guy unless you have a Hydro unit that can break their Hydro shield often. The reason why is because whenever the Pyro Flag Bearer hits you and your character is shielded, he will generate a Pyro shield and grants it to all his allies. This will basically make it borderline impossible if you're running a team with little to no Hydro. Or of course, the strategy that I did while I was testing on stream was simply just don't get hit and try to do enough damage and just stagger the guy so that you can kill them as fast as you can. And then the second wave, we do have the triple Kenki. So unless you are mid-air or elevated on things like Zhongli Pillar, the Cryo Kenki will always initiate its attack by dashing halfway across the map. So my strategy here is that once the Cryo Kenki does dash, you want to go a bit on the further side or run to the opposite side. This will make the Cryo Kenki run back toward its group, thus making grouping much easier. And then after that, my recommendation is simply try to stick to the Anemo Kenki so that you can trigger its melee attacks, and you can try to pull the Anemo Kenki back towards the original Mask Kenki. And then the rest is straightforward. AoE here is very highly recommended. I will go through the team recommendations later on.
はびこりなさい。
股間奥義。私を起こす雨描きがたし。おとなしくしな。
全部丸見えね。せははや。
渚のリング。ふっや。歌よに。
痛くしちゃう。
雨描きがたし。
せははびこりなさい。
よく見ておけ。
手をつなぎましょう。
はい、マジで役払い。
めまいぶ痛くし。
サイウルコこの手。わかるかい。はい。炭になるがいい。
はびこりな。
おとなしくしな。
やはいや覚えた。
やっはっ
は痛くしちゃう。
股間奥義。はっぜ。この剣はわかるかい。えい。これが海山。邪魔をするな。雨描きがたし。
はびこりなさい。せ
Since the video is already past the 30 minutes mark, I'm not going to take too much of your time. So yesterday I did a first live stream over on YouTube to test a bunch of different teams over on the latest Abyss for quite a few hours. And in terms of the team recommendation, I can only recommend really 2 things. Because we know that the first half, right, they want 2 things. They want you to run an Electrocharge team. It doesn't have to be an Electrocharge centric team. You could even run like Raiden with Neuvillette, where Raiden's just there to trigger Electrocharge. But the second thing you want is definitely a team that has a potent healer. So like the units I mentioned for the Radiant Moonfly, we do have like Barbara, Jean, Baiju, Neuvillette. I even did one of my viewer Abyss with an Escoffier Electrocharge team, and surprisingly paired together with Furina, Escoffier's healing was good enough to be able to really max out the healing. But the one thing I will mention is that you don't necessarily need a lot of healing if you use the strategy that I mentioned where you try to keep your team topped up and close to full health, right? And then whenever the Moonfly does the transformation, you basically use your burst to iframe and you can minimize the amount of damage that you and your teammates take, as well as decrease the amount of healing needed for you to achieve max HP. So that's why in the footage that you saw just now, my Barbara used her skill and burst at the exact time that he does the ability, so it looks as if he literally applied no debuff. So yeah, I would say healers right now are some of the options, something that you should definitely consider. Electrocharge is needed first half. Auroron Fischl Sucrose is probably the most F2P option possible, so maybe if you can replace Barbara with Kokomi, it might actually net with a bit more damage. Or just like the gameplay I showed just now against the Knuckle Duckle, which is Koran Electrocharge, which with an FR it can definitely clear easily, but that's the point I'm trying to say. Second half, I would say the most F2P option or pseudo F2P option is probably Nahida Hyperbloom paired alongside with Beidou. However, as you might have noticed in the gameplay, my Kuki is level 100, so instead of doing 32k Hyperbloom, she is doing close to 36 to 37k. So that may be something that's not completely F2P, but I just want you guys to know that with, maybe you can use 5-star weapons or really good investment, you should be able to use Hyperbloom as well as Beidou finally shining again against the second half, because a lot of the enemies in the second half tends to be like in pair of 2, which is perfect for any units that wants to go against 2 enemies. Like let's say Nilo Bloom is obviously best in slot here with Llama, and then Beidou can also finally come back from the ashes that she came from. Or you want to run this weird team with like Hyper Burgeon with Thoma instead. Burgeon is kind of okay, but just not as good as Hyper Bloom. I think the other options, let's look at the other options that I have obtained. I think I tried the Veressa Overloaded team with Math, and obviously that works because she has amazing AoE. Floran Taser for the first half with Jean is also pretty good. Just make sure your Jean is built enough ER to burst every rotation, and just make sure that she can actually heal quite a potent amount. I tried an F2P variant where I replaced Barbara with Xingqiu, but instead I replaced Sucrose with Sayu, and the clear time is actually quite similar to the Barbara team. So if you're feeling a bit funny with playing a weird on-field Sayu, you can also try that. The second half, Freeze can definitely work. Just make sure that your cryo DPS actually does damage, and I'm talking about like Escoffier with either Ayaka or Skirk. I don't see C0 Ricey being able to clear this unless you have Consolation 1 and maybe R1 of his own weapon. And for all the different variants, I think most of them are pretty decent. Just that as long as you pass the check for the first half being EC and a good healer, I think the teams that you run on the second half shouldn't matter too much. And that's all for the team recommendation. And before I end this guide video, I want to hear a little bit from you guys, and I'm requesting just a little bit of help for the feedback for the new format. Just let me know what you guys think about this video, because I think while I do like the way that I've been putting some effort to present all this information, I learned a bit more on my side. I feel like it's a bit too long for me to cram into a singular guide video. So I was thinking, what do you guys think if I were to split floor 11 and floor 12 to 2 separate sections, so that way I can put the floor 12 guide as fast as possible, and then I can always separate the floor 11 guide for anyone who may actually be interested in that, so that not only will the video be short, at least like you won't really have to skip through the whole floor 11 stuff. So I don't know, just let me know what you guys think, and what do you guys think of the new format. Do you think that the new additional run after the guide visual part is needed, or should I just do both in one? Just share any sort of feedback down in the comment section below. And if you find this guide useful or enjoyable, please give this video a like and subscribe for more endgame related content, and I will see you guys next time. This is Ethereal signing off, and I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors and your Spiral Abyss runs. Peace out, everyone.